We all have something we want to change, right? Maybe it's something about ourselves, or maybe we're trying to gently nudge someone we care about, a partner, a kid, a colleague, in a better direction. The point is, we all want to know, what's the secret to making positive change actually stick?
So let me ask you, what's your go-to move? When you really truly need to get yourself or somebody else to do something, what's the first tool you reach for?
Well, if you're like most of us, your instinct is probably to use warnings, to paint a pretty grim picture of what will happen if things don't change. It's a strategy that's built on fear.
But here's the kicker. What if that gut instinct, that thing we all do, is totally wrong? What if all the science shows that trying to scare people into changing is actually the least effective thing you could possibly do?
Okay, so let's dive right into this. We're going to call it the motivation myth. We all just assume that fear is this incredibly powerful motivator, but it turns out the scientific evidence tells a very, very different story.
I mean, think about it on a personal level. It's late, you're looking at that snack in the fridge. What's that little voice in your head saying? For a lot of us, it's some version of this, right? We try to scare ourselves straight.
And this isn't just you and me. This is a massive global strategy. We do it with our kids. It's on cigarette packs. It's in huge public health campaigns. The thinking is always the same. If we just show people how terrible the consequences are, surely they'll change their ways.
Except they don't. The science on this is surprisingly clear. Warnings have a really, really limited impact. Get this. One study on those graphic images on cigarette packs found something totally shocking. For a lot of smokers, after seeing those pictures, quitting actually became a lower priority. The warnings were literally doing the exact opposite of what they were supposed to do.
So what is going on here? This brings us to the next big idea. Why warnings backfire? And the answer is deep inside our brains, in the science of how we avoid things that make us feel bad. See, when our brain is faced with a scary threat, we don't always fight it head on. A lot of the time, our reaction is to flee or freeze. We just shut down. We try to get rid of that awful feeling. So we avoid the scary information or, and this is a big one, we rationalize. We tell ourselves stories. You know the one, oh, my grandpa smoked his whole life and lived to be 90, so I probably got good genes. We invent these stories to feel better, which can actually make us less likely to change.
And you can see this play out everywhere. There was a study that tracked investor behavior, and it was a perfect example. When the stock market was doing great, people were logging into their accounts all the time, just soaking up that good news. But what happened when the market tanked? You guessed it, people just stopped logging in. We will literally stick our heads in the sand to avoid information that makes us feel bad.
This whole idea of avoiding bad news, it actually points to something even deeper about how we're built. It turns out our brains basically have a positive filter. We're not just avoiding bad news, we're fundamentally hardwired for optimism. We are constantly on the lookout for good news.
Okay, check out this fascinating experiment. Researchers asked a bunch of people to guess their chances of experiencing different bad things, like getting hearing loss. Then they showed them two expert opinions. One was more optimistic than their own guess, and the other was more pessimistic. And the results? They were absolutely stunning. People consistently changed their minds when the expert gave them good news. You know, oh, great, my risk is lower than I thought. But they almost completely ignored the bad news. Our brains are literally built to absorb desirable information and let the undesirable stuff just slide right off.
Okay, so if scaring people doesn't work, what does? This is where things get really interesting and really practical. Instead of fighting against our brain's natural tendencies, what happens when we start working with them? Let's look at 3 powerful principles that do just that. And we'll start with an incredible real-world story.
So in this hospital, they used cameras and found that doctors and nurses were only washing their hands about 1 out of every 10 times they were supposed to. A pretty dismal rate. But then they tried something new. They put up an electronic board that showed the staff their hand washing rates in real time. And what happened? Compliance went through the roof, all the way up to 90%.
Now, this wasn't some kind of magic trick. This incredible turnaround was built on 3 core psychological principles that tap into what actually makes us tick.
Okay, principle number 1 is social incentives. It's simple. We are social creatures. We care, a lot, about what other people are doing. In that hospital, the staff could see their shift's hand washing rate right next to the rate for the whole week. This taps into that deep-seated desire we have to fit in, and maybe even do a little bit better than the other guys.
And the power of this is huge. For example, the British government tried this with late taxes. They stopped sending threatening letters and instead just added one simple sentence. 9 out of 10 people in Britain pay their taxes on time. Just that little nudge of social proof increased compliance by 15%, which brought in billions in revenue.
Principle number 2, immediate rewards. Look, the problem with big goals like being healthy is that the reward is way off in the future. In our brains, they're wired to prefer a sure thing right now over some uncertain thing way down the line.
Every time those hospital workers washed their hands, they saw the numbers on that screen tick up. That's a small, immediate, positive little reward.
And studies show this works for all kinds of things. Giving people small, immediate bits of positive feedback makes them way more likely to do the hard stuff that pays off later, like exercising or quitting smoking. It basically builds a bridge between what we're doing right now and the future goal we want to reach.
And that brings us to principle number 3, progress monitoring. Remember how our brains are so good at filtering out bad news? Well, the flip side is that they are hyper-tuned to good news, especially signs of progress. That electronic board focused the hospital staff's attention on their improvement, not on the threat of getting sick. Highlighting progress is an incredibly powerful way to grab attention and keep people motivated.
All right, so let's put this all together. How can these 3 principles work in concert? Well, let's look at an everyday example you might have even seen in your own mailbox.
This is a new kind of electricity bill, and just look at what it's doing. It hits you with a social incentive by comparing your energy use to your neighbors. It gives you an immediate reward, a simple little smiley face for doing better than average, and it allows for progress monitoring with a chart showing your usage over time. It's a masterclass in combining all 3 principles.
So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The fear of losing something often leads to us doing nothing. But the thrill of a gain, that's what inspires us to act. So as you go about your life, just think about it. With your own goals or with the people you're trying to help, where could you stop using threats and start highlighting progress instead? Start playing with social incentives, immediate rewards, and focusing on the positive. The results might just blow you away.